it's eye-popping. You know, I haven't seen the decommissioning plan for this. He's got his DEP permit, right?
Yeah.
And quasi-local permit, so he's been through all that, and that would have been under the lesser standards. My guess is, my hunch would be that it's weak.
How do I get a hold of this? How do I contact you?
I'll leave my card up here.
The decommissioning bond requirement in our ordinance is $100,000 for 5 turbines to be paid over 10 years, I think. So that
20.
over 20 years, little bits paid every year to be $100,000 sitting there 20 years from now to decommission 5. That seems way, way, way low.
Yeah, again, that's engineering stuff. I'm not an engineer, but we talked to engineers about this stuff, and we think it's just a huge time bomb awaiting the state. Because these things are massive, and they have. How many of you have gone to a wind site and seen the construction and stuff? It's not great. They do a good job. They hire the best outfits to do the work, but they do stream disruption and salamanders and all this, all the name because it's so good and great. And the law says they have to do it. The Maine has to do it. That they get a free pass on all sorts of standards that a cell tower wouldn't. I had a lady call up near Eustis. End of the year, I was driving on the interstate, and she said, Chris O'Neill. I said, yeah. She goes, I'm so-and-so. I live in Eustis Bridge. I need your help. You're friends with Maine Mountains, right? I said, yeah, what can I do for you? I mean, that's not far from the Kitty project, which is a big project, right up on the border, West Bigelow. She said, they want to put a cell tower up behind my house. And I said, I don't have any beef with cell towers. I'm actually using one right now to talk to you. I can see it. She goes, you're not helping me. I said, well, cell towers are useful and they're necessary, and they're not all that big either, you know. I'm sorry, you're going to have to call somebody else. She learned that I wasn't a true nigger. Anything else I'm happy to take a stab at. You have a program to get to, so I'll step aside and let you do it. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you, Chris. We appreciate you driving all this way. Thank you. So there is a few of us up in the task force coming in here today. We're like the backbone. We represent a lot of people. And we have a website. And if you haven't visited, we invite you to visit it. We have a lot of information on there. I think we'll look at it a little bit more later. So why we're all here today is to talk about the citizen petition amendment that will be on the ballot next Tuesday. Here's the verbiage. Pretty clear. I mean, instead of the current 4,000 foot from residences, we are asking for 4,000 feet from property line to protect property. It's very simple. I mean, protect property. We asked for the retroactivity to go back before the last application was given to the CEO. Does anybody have any questions on this? Pretty simple. So we want to tell you a little bit about why we're doing it. Distance is the only way to get to ensure that your property will be not devalued by site noise and health concern. And we're not just talking about Pisgah. We're talking about anybody who wants to come close. It could be anybody's backyard, not just the people on 180. And there are people in Clifton who don't have residences on their property, and they are not protected at all. They have their 2 times the wind tower height, that's it, that's all they have for protection. And that's just physical safety if it falls down, or ice storm. So that doesn't help the property values, or anybody who wants to use their property in the future. Let's say somebody wants to put a camp on their property that they don't have a camp already on. It would be in that unsafe zone.
Jess, with this project, what would be the property if it's 2 times the wind, 2 times the turbine height, how far from property lines would that be then?
With the Fisker project, it is, they have 455-foot towers, sorry,
From a person's property line?
from the property. And then if they had a residence on their land, it'd be 4,000, with the current ordinance. And that's why we're asking for this new amendment. We don't think that people just live in their house. People live on their land. And that is huge. I mean, let's protect people's property. Simple, it's very simple. Questions yet? Okay, questions yet? We have Eddington close by, they have 1 mile for residents. Holden 3 times the tower height, which would be over a mile.
13.
Oh, sorry. Which would be over a mile if the towers were 400 feet high.
A mile from property line.
Mile for property lines, yeah. Yeah, most of these are property lines.
Yeah.
And then I think in the next slide. Yes, Woodstock. Woodstock has a wind turbine, a wind farm. And they went, oops, we messed up. We gotta fix that. So now they have a 1 mile from property lines. I don't know about you, I don't wanna, oops.
Same with Freedom.
Didn't Freedom do the same thing?
I believe so. I think that might, did I miss that one? Is that back here?
They passed
Oh,
their
that-
fabulous, it's not on there.
It's in our letter.
Yeah.
It's in the letter people got.
I missed it when I put it on here. But yes, that is a mile, is that a mile? Yeah, mile from property lines now. It used to be much less.
What did you say about retroactivity?
On the amendment,
Yeah.
the task force amendment, it is, let me see if I can get that.
I'll speak to that. The reason why we made this amendment that will be voted on June 10th retroactive to last August 2013 is because last September, PISCA submitted application number 2 for a project that looks exactly the same as the project that's currently being looked at in court. So their very first application was 2010. That got permitted, and the business court overturned that permit in December, and now that's being looked at by the Supreme Court of Maine. So that is held up. So the developer submitted application number 2 in September of 2013, and that's tabled. So there's ambiguity around whether that's alive as an application or dormant or nothing. And so in order to get this, if this amendment passes, in order to get it relevant to any new applications, we had to retro it to August 2013 to cover that possibility. Does that make sense?
Yes, it does.
Yeah.
And the planning board has said that they tabled it and they, it's not active. But just in case it comes back and they say, oh yes, it is active, we wanted to cover our bases. Even Angus King, who was one of the chief writers for the state
Wind
what's the
law.
word? The big law that allows windows. He says it should be above a mile, and then the World Health Organization should at least be a mile. There's even the French universities or academies They were saying a mile, at least a mile, if not more.
Yes, can I ask a question? I tried to research, the Angus King thing, and the only thing that I can find is in the Portland Press Herald, where he referenced a half a mile. Can you tell me where you got the 1 mile?
I don't have that reference right in front of me. I apologize. Can I get back to you?
Yeah, because I tried to research some of the stuff in the letter just for my own curiosity. I went to both of those and couldn't find either one of those facts. So I was hoping to get a different.
Well, I was completely prepared for that question.
He'll deny it anyway.
We went to Bull Hill. And this is the microwave tower on the sheet that's in Linda Williams' yard. This is what it says 4,500 feet from the microwave tower to the little tower. That's too close to people. That's too close to people's property. So now I think we're gonna go, I'm gonna show you our website. This is our website. This is just this is the tower that Pisca is proposing. That is this one. We definitely want you to come in and visit our website. We're not going to talk about the whole thing, but it's not. I want to stick to the 4,000 foot setback. Somebody else want to come up and speak to this?
I feel like you presented it well. Are there any questions in this room about the amendment that's being voted on June 10th, where we are asking you to vote in favor of a 4,000 foot setback from property lines, as opposed to what we have now, which is 4,000 feet from houses and 910 feet from property lines. So we are asking citizens to vote for a change in that, so a new setback would be 4,000 feet from property lines. Are there any questions about that?
I apologize for playing catch up here, but if this were to pass, would basically bury the program? I mean, could they still put them up there? Are there property lines within that 4,000?
It would be very restrictive on the project. What it would say to the developer is, if you're going to put your turbines that close to people's property, you have to mitigate with them. So it's forcing the developer to buy the rights from the people who would be the most impacted. So instead of, as it is now, where the development is just using people's land as a buffer, this changes it and says if you're going to have this much impact on people's land, you have to mitigate with them.
How many people does this affect?
I don't have that.
Well, in reality, it affects anybody in Clifton who might end up near a project, because it's it's an ordinance for the whole town, and we don't know where the projects are going to be. Right now, you probably just mean the Pisca project.
I'm talking about the one we're putting in now, and you're saying here that the amendment puts restrictions of 910 feet to the property line, is that?
In the current LUO and the proposed LUO, it is 2 times the turbine.
910, and you're doing 4,000.
Yes.
The
What
properties,
does the current one say?
the current one says the current ordinance says you need to be 2,000, you need to be 2 times the turbine height, whatever turbine gets proposed. 2 times that height from boundary.
I thought it was 4,000 feet from a
From,
residence.
and
It's
that's
both.
another setback,
It's both.
from occupied structures, from buildings where people live basically. You gotta be 4,000 feet from those. So if you're, if you've got there's a property that doesn't have any buildings on it, they can be 900 feet or 10 feet from that.
The 4,000-foot setback from residences is strictly a sound setback. So they're basically,
So
you know,
the physical wind turbine is 2 times the turbine,
right,
has to be 2 times the turbine.
in
height.
case it falls
property
over.
lines.
A property line, which is 910 feet.
With the Piscas turbines.
The Piscas, I think the only property line mitigation they had was with Bengal Water District. One of the turbines is like 478 feet, the Bengal Water District.
So how many other property lines does he have to deal with?
You mean, would he have to deal with if we pass this? Is that what you?
The 910 feet, how many does he have to deal with?
Just that one right now, I think.
I think so.
I believe that's the only one as far as.
That's the closest one within that 910 feet, or?
They had to be
The
really.
next one out from there, which is a property line, would be Tim and Diana Higgins. Their property line is 1,500 feet, so they didn't have to be mitigated with the current ordinance.
But if the new one, he's gonna have to go to all of them, is that what it is?
If the 4,000-foot setback from property lines was approved, he would have to mitigate with anybody. who
With all
property-
his property abutters?
Because that would make his sound buffer his. That would be mitigated.
Unless he wanted to, unless he was able to move the turbines farther away from them, I don't know.
I don't know how many it would be. It seems like it would be 10 or something like that. I'm not
But
sure.
this is protecting people's property from that sound buffer. The 4,000 feet from residences is a protection from the sound.
Right.
So if they wanted to build a structure that was closer, they would listen to that sound.
They would be, well, I think,
Unless there's a 4,000.
I mean, in
for
my
property.
opinion, I think everybody in Clifton is going to hear them at one point or another. Nobody is going to not hear them all the time. It might not be every day, but I think everybody in Clifton will hear them. Just the way our landscape is. We have lakes, we have mountains, we have bridges.
A totally different question, but have we done any research on property values on the other towns that this happened to? I'm thinking I would never buy a piece of property with a windmill in the town. And so I'm thinking I'm stuck in my house forever.
Yeah.
I have a bunch of studies that, I could pull up, that there's a lot of verbiage, and I haven't gone through and highlighted which ones would
But
be.
the values have gone down.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
And people are sick and stuff.
Yep. Or, and like Mars Hill, they've all been bought out. If they've made a complaint, they've been bought out.
For lower than what it was probably worth.
I don't know the numbers,
Right.
but they were bought out.
Well, not all of them have been bought out. There's one of them who built a bunker so that he could stand it. He did.
But that was the only way he could do it, right? That was the only way he could stay.
He's a Vietnam vet who he did several tours in Vietnam. He's heard a lot of noises.
So I assume a lot of these people that are being bought out, the sound level at their house might be less than the sound limit in whatever ordinance, whether it's DEP or otherwise, yet they still feel bothered or annoyed or disturbed from the noise such that the wind companies feel compelled to pay them off so that they don't spread their stories. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah. I don't mean to just.
Come on out.
Typically, what you're calling mitigation is oftentimes appears in the form of a sound easement. An easement is attached to your deed, and it stays on your deed. And that may or may not affect the value of your property. My sense is it does, negatively. But when I sign a sound easement, a noise easement, they call them sound easements. The difference between sound and noise is sound, noise is annoyance. But an annoyance might not annoy you, but it annoys me. It's fuzzy gnat. Yeah, so be safe. But the sound easement typically has with it what's called a good neighbor clause. That's what they call it. We call it a gag clause. But it says, for consideration, we'll give you $10,000 a year. You're going to live in misery, or you're going to have to sell your house, or whatever. But we don't want to read you quoting in the papers anymore. We don't want to see you testifying at a public hearing. You shut up. It's a deal. It's a contract. People sign them. But I've talked to so many people who have signed them, and they just feel like they're being raped. So I'm sorry to use a harsh word, but it's a harsh situation.
And if I could ask a question of you, Chris. The difference between the actual DVH sound limits, sound restrictions in ordinances is different than the possible low frequency that is hurting people. Do we want to get into that battle?
Yeah, it's insidious. And they have, some projects have complaint protocols, and the permit will say, all right, if you hear noise, you call this 800 number, and the developer, the one in Woodstock, they set up an 800 number, and people call it, at 10:30 at night. What's the DEP going to send somebody from Augusta out tomorrow morning at 10? It's almost unenforceable. And even if you could enforce it, it's fleeting. The wind shifts 10 degrees and suddenly it's gone. And as soon as the inspector goes away, it's back.
So the best way to protect people and people's property is this.
So all these studies and stuff are saying, at least a mile.
Oh, yeah.
Why 4,000 feet instead of a mile?
I would love to have I would love to have a complete ban on windmills. I would. But to compromise with people that do want windmills in Clifton, we thought 4,000 feet was a good compromise. The developer would have to mitigate to protect people's property and their houses.
It
It's
also,
also simple.
yeah.
It's just simple. The current one is 4,000 for houses. It's pretty tough to communicate information to people. It's complicated to get people to, and so we debated a lot what we wanted for an amendment, and just switching it from 4,000 feet to houses to 4,000 feet from property lines seemed the easiest thing to communicate. It was, we would all prefer a stronger setback than that in the task force, no question about it.
And one of the things that we want to make people aware of is that when we focus so much on what Pt2 has proposed, that we're not thinking about the whole possibility here of other developers, and the ordinance that we're going to be voting on July 1st takes woodchuck off the prohibited list. And so you need to be thinking, if wind turbines are going on woodchuck, how much of a setback would you want from woodchuck?
Sue.
You've raised some interesting questions. So my name is Sue Shane, and I serve on the planning board of Eddington, and I was on the planning board when we constructed our current wind ordinance. And it took us almost 2 years of research to come up with the setbacks and rules that we did. We chose 1 mile from a structure because in our research, both on the continent and the European continent and in the United States, that was the point at which complaints dropped off. And the one difference that we have that the Clifton ordinance did not have, when we wrote ours, it was seasonally occupied structures as well as your full-time structures. because we felt it was important to protect people's seasonal, their camps, their hunting lodge, their whatever. And the part and parcel to this is the whole sound question. The industry standard for measuring sound is A-weighted sound. That was formed by OSHA for factories so that you wouldn't go deaf building your Chevy Malibu and your Ford Ranger truck, and you wouldn't go deaf making trampolines, and Winnebago's 5,000 hours a year. However, there's another level, another important component to measuring sound, one which people in the live performance industry deal with, and it's the C-weighted sound. And if you have read in the papers and you have read the complaints about waterfront concerts, and they've talked about how far the noise goes, C-weighted is a lower level pressure sound. And with respect to the waterfront concerts, they can plant 5,000 bushes, they can put up tube traps, but C-weighted sound travels a different way than A-weighted sound does. And it travels over much longer terrain and surfaces. So that was the other reason for choosing the setback that we did, because the C-weighted level drops off. However, in our ordinance, the C-weighted measurement is just as important in the application process as the A-weighted sound is. And this is an idea that didn't get spoken about too much for a long time. It would, like I said, in the entertainment industry, we have to deal with it all the time with little old ladies on Park Avenue who don't like the way the band in the Armory sounds. You know, that's when they talk about shut it down. But it's because it's a constant sound and it is intermittent but a constant level. That's why we chose the testing we did and the setbacks we did. You decided to take a bold step by doing 4,000 feet from a property line. And there are people who will argue that that's unfair and it shouldn't be done. And when we were working on our setbacks, we heard people say the same thing, and it boils down to, as Paula said, you cannot look at this proposed amendment that you're going to vote on as something that's to deal with Pisgah. You have to look at the fact that you have Woodchuck, you have Clark Hill. If they can figure out how to put a stinking cell tower on those over there, somebody's going to want anything that makes wind, anything that clicks on the chart enough is going to be a possible location. So it affects your entire community. The one thing that I find very difficult, you asked the lady in the front, second row asked about how many boundaries. One of the sad parts about this is the Clifton Task Force on Wind is trying to protect the people in Clifton. There is no protection for the people in Otis.
Right.
All those people on that water, and the sound loves to travel on water, do not have a dog in that fight. And I think that in the next several years, you're going to start finding that there's going to have to be something dealing with that as these large projects continue to get proposed, because people have no speech. And the thing that's great about property lines as you've chosen them is that you have an expectation of use of your property. And I think everybody has that. And just because you didn't build a house today on your property that's within 4,000 feet of a property line of a proposed project doesn't mean you don't want to build it in 6 years. You know, but if you don't protect those people and their property, then they have no choice. So, I just wanted, because I had worked on our ordinance.
It's a quasi-taking.
Hmm?
It's a quasi-taking.
Yes,
I got a question. You're on the planning board in Bennington,
yes, I am.
and the gentleman that spoke at the beginning of the meeting, I know, spoke about the gas plant fees.
Mhm.
And I know that residents in Eddington, a lot of residents that live around the edge of the river have a big issue with that gas plant.
Mhm.
So my question is, well, I don't know if it's a question or not, but I'm not sure that, I mean, you guys can't do anything about the gas plant fees,
No,
but he's standing up here saying it's a better way than the turbines.
he's making a point in his presentation that I'm not going to comment on one way or the other.
Right, but my take on the conversation was that if he had a choice, he would take the gas plant over the wind turbines.
I believe, and
exists.
Chris, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but what I picked up from your statement was that you are, in terms of return on the dollar, VZ is a better project, is a better project.
Impact versus benefit, yeah. It's apples and oranges. And I did say, you know, we always say, there's impact to every development, every form of development.
Let's move on to, part of understanding, if you're in this room and you want, and you agree with us that a setback of 4,000 feet from property lines is a good move, then we have to also explain that the July 1st vote on the planning board revisions is also an important vote. It really is a double header. In order for this setback to change, the June 10th vote has to go up and the July 1st vote has to go down. Because the votes are not on the same day, which we had originally thought everything would be voted on June 10th. And then if our setback change was approved, it would stand. But as it is, if we win on June 10th and the setback changes to 4,000 feet from property lines, and then the planning board revisions also get approved on July 1st, our win will be nullified. That's just the unfortunate consequence of the votes not being on the same day. So if you're in this room and you agree with what we're trying to accomplish for Clifton, you have to vote yes on June 10th and no on July 1st. They're equally important.
I think Jared had.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of follow up on your comments about DVC and the low frequency noise and how that is an important factor to be considered. And thought I should mention that the proposed land use ordinance here in Clifton removes all low frequency sound standards, including DVC. There is no low frequency sound standard.
Somebody get her a fan.
The other thing.
Oh, Lord.
The other thing I wanted to comment regarding something you said was the Bangor Waterfront Concert Series. You can do a search on Bangor Daily News website and find some pretty good information on sound levels from that site. And I find it a bit ironic that they're generally somewhere around between 100 to 105 decibels. And I believe that's dBA at the sound stage of the concerts. So we, and what's ironic about that is that the proposed turbines here in Clifton are, I think, 106 dBA right at the turbine. So when we hear stories of people in Old Town, Eddington, all around,
Milford.
we're talking about the same noise level. The main difference between the two noise levels is that a wind turbine would be 400 feet up in the air instead of down at ground level.
Wasn't there a reason that they changed to the direction of the stage so it would travel up the water, the sound, and not?
And it does, all the way to Milford.
I don't think they intended that. I don't think they intended it. They were trying to take the heat off of those neighborhoods in Bangor that complained, and then they turned the stage, and now Old Town's complaining.
Yeah. So sound travels.
I personally have a friend in Milford who hears every single concert.
That's amazing.
And so the other thing I wanted to say is that, I'm a big fan of the Waterfront Concert Series. I think it's the best thing that's ever happened to Bangor. And it's not noise that I have a problem with. As a matter of fact, I was having a conversation with a former planning board member recently who said, we asked for proof, we wanted proof of the harm that this noise and sound does, and we just didn't see it. Well, to me, it's similar to saying, before I'll believe in Chinese water torture, prove to me that a drop of water will hurt. So, a little bit of noise on a Friday night, or during a work day, don't have a problem with. What I have a problem with would be subjected to somebody else's noise any given time of day, any day of the week, any week of the year. And I also liked your comment about coming out of the taxpayer pocket or the ratepayer pocket. And so as we're listening to this noise, we can take comfort in the fact knowing that we're either paying for it through Bangor Hydro or we're paying through it when we pay our property taxes.
I wanted to say a footnote to Julie's about the July vote. That's only one reason to vote no on the land use ordinance. If you haven't had an opportunity to find out all the changes there are many changes in that, and I hope in the next few weeks that you can get an opportunity to see what some of those changes mean. There are a lot of taking out language which protects abutters and homeowners, which removes that language from the ordinance.
I've got a few of them right up here. Woodchuck Hill is completely removed from prohibited sites for wind turbines. The total elimination of low frequency sound limits and standards. The elimination of compliance testing in wind shear conditions. Changes in the audible sound standard to make it incomprehensible to most people. Jared, would you like to speak a little bit on the LEQ versus L90?
Sure. LEQ is basically an average sound level over a period of time, whereas L90 is the sound level that's exceeded 90% of the time. L90 is commonly used to measure background sound, and that is its sole purpose is to eliminate periodic noises. So when people describe the sounds from windmills, they usually talk about a thumping or a whoosh, whoosh, whoosh. So an analogy, I suppose, would be the beating of a drum. If I was to sit here and beat a drum, L90 would not pick up the sound of that drum being hit, whereas LEQ would. We've heard a lot about how our sound standards are more strict than DEP's. However, DEP does quite a few things that our land use ordinance would not do. One of those things is, again, there would be no LEQ standard, it's only the L90, which in my opinion is an appropriate way to measure that sound. The other big issue I have is wind shear. When the DEP tests for no sound compliance from windmills, they typically focus on the conditions where complaints are most likely to occur. And that is most commonly when during stable atmospheric conditions where there's a wind up high and very little wind at ground level. That tends to be when people notice here and are offended by that sound. The proposed land use ordinance would go to a turbine on minus turbine off type of measurement. So any given day, whether it was windy or not windy, they'll run the windmills, take a measurement, shut them off, take another measurement, do a number of averages, and again on that L90. So if that ordinance passes, I feel pretty darn confident in saying there will not be a noise violation from the ordinance. It's just tailored to the industry. So I guess in summary, I don't think it's as simple as saying that, I think maybe it is as simple as saying that our ordinance is not as strict as DEP standards, even though that the number itself may be lower.
The 45 and 35. The deletion of the simple statement of the right of landowners to enjoy the property without undue disturbance from abutting or a neighbor's uses and purposes of the land use ordinance. I want to enjoy my property. I think everybody else wants to too. The addition of retroactive clauses requested by Pisgah to allow approval of their application to the Superior Court has already thrown out. The town attorney has reviewed these parts of the land use ordinance, of the proposed land use ordinance, has recommended them not to include in the retroactive clauses. There was a petition that was submitted to the planning board that asked for retroactive clauses. These retroactive clauses go back to the 2010 to 2011.
2010, the planning board retroactivity in their July 1st package of revisions would have some of the measures being retroactive to 2010, so that the original application, which has gone through all the rigmarole that it has, would be reconsidered under new rules. And the town attorney advised against that retroactive clause in the planning board proposal, and they decided to do it anyway. So that would be, from Pete's and my perspective, who sued the town because they hadn't enforced the ordinance. That case went to Superior Court where we won. Now it's going to the Maine Supreme Court, and that will work itself out in the next few months. That all of that work on all parties the planning board is saying, oh well, let's just make new rules for a 4-year-old application and see if we can get it through that way. That will be a legal mess.
And it was against the town lawyer's advice, and they also, the planning board has also said that if it does go to court, they won't stand behind the new ordinance. That they will let the courts decide if it's legal or not. So the planning board has decided, and they have written it in, correct?
I'm sorry?
They wrote this in to the ordinance?
Right. And it happens that that 3 retroactive clauses address the 3 biggest reasons that the town lost in court. Because of isocontour maps, because of low frequency violation, and because of the height restriction. And the planning board has rewritten those in a way that if the application that they had before came to them now, that those obstacles, they would tried to write those out.
They have written them out, and they want it retroactive to the time of that application. And then they wrote, oh, well, we know it's not legal, so if it goes to court, we're not going to stand behind the ordinance that we have just spent the last 5 months on.
And who's paying for the lawyers that are fighting this out that they're not standing behind?
That's why they don't want to stand behind it, because they don't want the town to pay any more money. The town would, they say, the planning board has said that it would only be like a $500 lawyer fee to say that we're staying out of it. And
But
that,
even before.
oh, before, yes, we have spent thousands of dollars. The
Right.
town, your tax dollars have been, oh yeah.
Over